Welcome to the Data Security Talk, the podcast that keeps you updated with trends and approaches to business data security. I am Bill Falk, President, Go-to-Market with Actifile. Today's guest is my good friend and colleague, James Oliverio from Ideabox, a partner of Actifile's. James, could you say hello and introduce
Sure.
yourself to the
Thanks,
audience?
Bill. Yeah, welcome everyone. My name is James Oliverio, CEO and founder of Ideabox. We're a CISO function or CISO-driven company that helps companies get their security posture aligned with whether we regulatory or non-regulatory. So think of us as fractional CISOs.
Awesome. And you've been doing this for
Oh
quite a
God, I've
long
been
time, I think.
close to like 30 years. I mean, I started in the industry on as an IT jock at a Wall Street firm. That firm got, I grew up in that firm, if you will, became the CIO. And then those bankers, when that bank got purchased, the bankers encouraged me to go start a business, which I did. And that MSP practice grew and I sold it a bunch of years ago. And then I decided to take a break and spend some time in the security sector. So I enrolled in a program at Harvard on risk management, mitigating risk in the information age, and learned a concept called ROM, return on mitigation, explaining the ROI of cyber. And we embarked out and talked to a lot of companies, both non-for-profit in the healthcare sector, and helped them with their security posture. And a lot of the pieces that you'll hear today, probably in today's podcast, is around the big pieces data, the classification of data, and how you find it, tag it, and show auditors or show the regulators, if you will, and the auditors that you actually have controls around that sensitive data.
Mm-hmm. And the most amazing thing, or one of the most amazing things about you, having known you for a while and seen you evolve through this industry, is while you're a technologist, you pay even more attention to the business issues and the business drivers and what are changing in the market. And today we're just going to cover a subset of all of the breadth that you have. And today it's about what's happening in the healthcare industry around HIPAA compliance, discovering and encrypting PHI and ePHI. So that's the
Yeah.
topic for today. And just to get things going, what's really interesting to me is how, in my nascent experience around this topic, is the where people most often go is HIPAA is about healthcare providers, hospitals, doctors, and whatnot. And what's become true is that it's not just about those players. It's really anybody that has any company that has exposure to that data. It could be an employer who's got employee health records, and there's all kinds of different examples. And today we're gonna talk about a couple of examples that you've been involved in that are illustrations of the breadth of the problem.
Yeah, Bill. I think you're right. I mean, it's just not healthcare or healthcare industry in general. Every company has employees, and they keep sensitive data around, about those employees, whether it be annual health proxies, et cetera. So I think it's a challenge for all organizations. But today's topic is a couple of case studies that we work through, both non-for-profit and companies do analytics around PHI and PII, and a health hospital that's a health center with 5 locations where we helped them with the security posture and used the proper scoping and educated them around, well, here's the data. This is what the data is telling us of what we're detecting in your streams, right? What's coming in through various things like Outlook attachments, who's using what websites and what web applications are you using that is exchanging very highly sensitive data.
Mm-hmm.
And we're able to, with the Actifile platform, we're able to scope that and have a conversation around, okay, here's what we're detecting. Does this fit within your business process? And have that conversation. And then always the conversation leads to, well, what do we do next? How do we protect that? And Actifile actually does that, those pieces. But I think the biggest piece, I think, when the challenge that some of these organizations have. Um, they were both under audit by the state of New York. Similarity, one had a 171, which is really a NIST framework, and an 853. It's more granular, more detailed. So think of a 171 with 129 controls you have to check, and an 853 is 326, but the same control families. So when you think high level, there's the management, there's the operational, there's the technical, and then there's the privacy piece. There's a big component of the privacy piece when you look at the frameworks of NIST, where can an organization demonstrate they can tag it, classify it, and then put parameters around where is that data traveling, and when we're required, do we dispose of it correctly, right? So the big
Mhm.
piece is where is it, right?
Mhm.
Actifile does that really well
Mhm.
and scopes it
Mhm.
really well. And I
So
think, yeah,
let's sorry to cut you off, but let's look at a couple of these examples. You've touched on some high level things, but let's look at your first example here, first experience that you had here that you wanted to talk about, and and drill into that a little bit. So what set it up? Like what was the environment?
yeah, the
Where
environment,
are they? What's
absolutely.
what's the problem that you were asked to solve, and how did you go about solving it?
So one of our clients, AHI Health Institute, which works with access care organizations around the region, exchange informations around procedures. Like they're always looking to, they're a non-for-profit that calculates and looks at procedures and data and lots of data, Medicare data, medical data. So they were exchanging a lot of sensitive data. In order to be allowed to have access to that, the state of New York says you must have this standards put in place. We'll give you access to it, but you have to show us that you're going to work on this path towards an 853 R4 certification. So that once they got their grant and they're going to have access to this data and have analytics to be done it, they have to demonstrate they hired consultants or auditors to do a pre-audit. What controls are in place? What's your system over plan look like? Where are your key systems? Do you have process in place? So they really put a lot of effort in this. This took about 18 months to get through those pieces. Out of there's a bunch of controls in those documentations around when we get to the data piece. Who's handling, how you handle it. There's basically a chain of custody around data. Can you demonstrate who's using that? Now, the tools of the day, um, very expensive. This is a non-for-profit. So they say, get creative. What can we do? What can we use? So we introduce certain tools, and then here along comes Actifile. Actifile clearly was able to identify what was coming in through Outlook or attachments. Did it meet some PHI or PII classification? Quantify it through some algorithm, which it does. And we're able to represent and show, okay, near real time, here are files that are coming in. And will this suffice to the auditors? Yes, absolutely. We're able to show reports of here are companies and organizations that are sharing, for example, very large spreadsheets. Spreadsheets, I couldn't see the contents of it, but they told me there were 500,000 and 600,000 rows of patient-related data. Things like in there were, of course, date of birth, procedure, cost of the procedure, diagnosis. I mean, some really sensitive stuff, cancer patients, I mean, all over the globe, because they're looking at the analytic of the information to see how they could drive down costs, especially being non for profit. And I guess what you would do with this data, some of the data is shared with the state of New York looking for, my understanding, looking for fraud. So think about what this, Adirondack does is my understanding they analyze a lot of data that is really sensitive. I mean, you got to really put protections around it. So the traditional models that people think about are firewall, data in an enclave or in an area of the network or cloud that least privileges are given access, and you have an audit trail on who has access to those files, but they're not encrypted. It's where Actifile comes in. So when you think of prior breaches in similar sectors, like we'll use the NSA or Target or Equifax. Okay. when they peeled back those breaches, it was exactly that. It wasn't the databases. It was the data that was in spreadsheets that the management kept. In the case like AHI, they keep a lot of stuff in spreadsheets that if a threat actor gets to it, it becomes gold, liquid gold to them. They can really transaction off of that.
Hmm.
So I think that's the missing component most organizations think of, forget. A breach occurs, and it happens today, unfortunately.
Hmm.
Forensics comes in, and then they have a wake-up call going, holy crap, we didn't realize we had this kind of data with the kind of sensitivity in the files. And
Hmm.
I think Actifile really solves that problem. But before you get there, you have to, before you can address a problem, you have to assess and scope it, right? I think that's why, like, we got excited 2.5 years ago that when we put this out there, just listening on, if you will, listening at the transactions as people were working, it led us to the path of how we tighten up the controls and work towards their 853 around the privacy of data, how we're
Hmm.
going to do it, and not build a huge security stack of bureaucracy and break down business process, made it very transparent. I mean,
Hmm. Hmm.
you know, again, AHI is a small organization, 853. You can be a multinational big company, 853. It's the same. It's the same hoop you've got to jump through.
And
And,
is
and
that a standard, or is that how did they have to? Do they have to regularly prove to the state of New York insurance board or someone else
yes,
what
there's
their
actually
capabilities
there's actually an annual attestation, and each quarter I have to submit where they are with the 323 controls that perhaps are outstanding, right? Meaning that there's 323 controls. Most organizations don't knock off all 323. They get to 75%, which is you're authorized to kind of handle this data. We trust you. An outside independent auditor certified that. We had that done 2.5, 3 years ago. Now the clock starts is that you have to self-police and self-audit yourself. And then the state comes in and randomly selects, well, send us evidence of XYZ, how you're doing something. And oh, by the way, submit. You had X amount of things on your POAM, which were your planned objectives to drive through, what you're showing the state that you have these outstanding items, and what you're going to do to address it. So, for
are?
example, what's not getting addressed at this one particular client is a DDoS attack. They're not going to spend any money and the reason why we can check that box and say, although it's a requirement for a standard, we're choosing and opting not to spend the money because we don't transaction anything on the website. Okay, everything's internally, and we're not a transactional based business. If you're an Amazon, you absolutely have to do that because your whole if someone shuts down your websites, you need to prevent DDoS, right? So a DDoS attack for AHI, set up another website, move the IP. Everybody works internally anyway. We're not reliant on the internet. So
Hmm.
that's why we chose that. So
Hmm.
that would be an example.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
certain companies will have different examples, but when it comes around the data, when I get back to that piece, is what you know today, it's not necessarily what's there tomorrow. Data changes. And this is not a one-time thing that you just do it, check a box. What we're seeing in our journey with the platform, and I'll use AHI as an example, they had a level of risk that Actifile was detecting. And I think it was in 2024, around August timeframe, we saw an anomaly of, let's just say the number was 100 million of data risk across all these files because they have a lot of patient-related data. It jumped 3x. So we looked into it and we shared the information, said we detected it looks like these are attachments. There's about 8 of them. Go investigate. So they did. And when they came back, they said, look, yeah, these came in from these access care organizations. Thanks for that. And then we saw the platform show from 383 down to 100. So what happened? They protected the data and they reduced it, but at least they knew what it came in. They took action.
Hmm.
So Actifal preemptively said, hey, it's here. We can tag it and protect it. Let's just make sure this is what you want us to do.
Hmm.
Right. But it also got the management, to think about, you know, half the problem is this came in through an unsecure connection through email, number one. So that's a problem. We need to tell those ACOs, stop doing that, right? And where I think when you think about that, when an organization realizes that data is coming in and out, they have to think about what other third-party arrangements or agreements and privacy statements they may have signed, and it shines a big light on it.
Mm-hmm.
So you can no longer, I think, stick your head in the sand and go, "Well, I didn't know that data was coming in." Well, you got to be proactive because you signed some agreement that any data that meets this criteria or classification, you're going to keep it protected.
Mm-hmm.
We absolutely do that.
Mm-hmm.
How we do it, we can show an example, the audit trail, and Actifile's providing us the how, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when I think about the regulatory business or the side of the business, having been an operator in my career of the uptime, all the systems, and now I'm on the data side and the security side about how to make a safer world for these organizations, for their employees and their customers. It's about the data. What's coming in and out? And I think it's a way to do it.
Mm-hmm.
There are other tools out there. We know that far more experience, more expensive, I would say, very complex.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so a new term that's Gartner's kind of bringing to the market is called DSPM, Data Security Posture Management. It was a phrase that was introduced, I think, in 21, 22. What is that? It's kind of replacing the DLP, data loss prevention. So it's a whole concept that your whole posture management around data. So it's at least we're pivoting organizations towards that piece. And I think it's timely because we're in the world of AI,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And this is another subject when I not even for AHI and for North Country, which we work for in the healthcare sector. Um, we're having discussions about because we have little fences and protections around that data. You have to think about you know if that weren't there, and if I were in their seat, I'd be concerned if some threat actor got in, not only stole the data, but can figure out because they can pull it all together and kind of chat GPT the world out of it. They can figure out certain things we're doing as an organization.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I think Actifile, although we talk about data protection and encryption, you know, it's going to help, I think, organizations think about they all want to get in the game of like how do we answer the markets about what we do around AI?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I think there's elements of the Actifile platform that if applied strategically, both regulated and non-regulated, will help them map that out.
Mm-hmm.
Especially because it comes back to the scoping piece.
Yeah. Amazing. You covered a lot of ground there, including some of the basic principles, which is, before my guess is before you got involved with AHI, they really couldn't answer a basic question, which is, do they really know where their data is? Do they know where their data is coming from? Do they know where their data is going? And as you said, it's all of this is about the data,
And how much of it?
right? The value.
So fast forward, both those organizations get a quarterly, monthly and a quarterly, and the annual goes into a packet. They want to see data flows at the board level. And I present each year just a summary of an oversight of where their security posture is. And I would, tell and coach anyone on the top of when it comes to cybersecurity. It's not about the tools. It's not about technology. It's about getting to the right people at the organization. It's a cultural thing. They need to create a vision document.
Yeah.
And it starts with we want to protect our employees and the information we keep on our employees. And that dovetails into keeping keep confidentiality with my vendors that I exchange information with. We treat that seriously. Okay. If you start with those two elements, all the other pieces fall in place. So you'll map out saying if you find it. So what is that? The third thing, we're going to train our individuals looking for threats because inside threats happen all the time. It's the innocent, I clicked on something.
Mm-hmm.
So it's starts with culture. From
Mm-hmm.
there, if you've got at the board level or the C-suite level, they're going to make those investments. Now, do you have we have a written information security plan. That's the NIST, right? You go on that journey and you manage around the framework.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't create these frameworks. These are frameworks that are NIST is a standard. You have high trust. You've got other frameworks out there. We chose those because they're agnostic. It doesn't matter what industry you're in.
Mm-hmm.
But if you follow the game plan in those frameworks, you have a much better, you, how to put it this way, if you get breached, if you're one of the clients on NIST, you're going to come out of it fine. You're going to be able to navigate it. It's
Mm-hmm.
all about the return on mitigation, right? What investment you put in, and you're going to make that trade-off that you come out the other side that when you're dealing with an event.
Mm-hmm.
It's
Mm-hmm.
that's the art of the deal. There's no silver bullet here. No one,
Right.
can you survive a major cyber event? And that includes doing tabletop exercise. We get involved in doing that, but even with the tabletops, perfect example with AHI and North Country, we're able to have them talk about if we lost our accounting system, they would have to go back to electronic records. They keep PDFs of financial statements. Where are they kept? On the network. If they got compromised, what next? We have to go to paper. What would be the recovery time objective to do that and the recovery point objective? Could you survive with 60 days? Is the best
Mhm.
you can do? Both of them said, no, we can't. We
Probably
wouldn't be
not.
able to we couldn't make payroll,
No. Well,
right?
there you go again. As I said earlier, you focus so
Data.
much of your expertise, your experience on the big time business issues. So let's talk a little bit about North Country because I think their story is maybe a little different from AHI. What's the story there? I think maybe they had a breach. Not
Yeah,
to lead you too far, but what's the story
yeah,
there?
they had some problems. Because there were 5 location health hospital. Think of upstate New York. Think of health centers, right, where they can service the community, create wellness, right, get people to comfort dentistry to full, body scans and stuff like that, right. So their challenges were as they started, getting more into this, they needed to show the state and their grant people that how they have systems in place. So they've got their EMS, EMR system, eClinical Works, right? But then where you pull data from, they had in both cases, both AHI and North Country, they're under constant attack by threat actors trying to get into their stuff. When I say constant, the average day is thousands of hits a day trying to
Gee.
get into their Microsoft 365.
Mm-hmm.
So because we have all these controls in place, they said, look, we need to start acting as if we were a regional hospital. So so let's pick a CMMC 171, not as big as an 853, but let's go through the basics, right? We started cleanup, took about 2 years working with people. You know, where are you with your Microsoft and Microsoft stack? Where's the data coming? At the time we started, Actifile wasn't actually be used. We put it in about 2.5 years ago. So I've been working with them close to 5. Um, we got to that level and it was like, wow, holy where is it? It was like, where is this data? And it was a lot of data being abandoned in the downloads folders of workstations. So we cleaned that up. And then they made a decision, well, we want this data protected. Then they turned that up and they were very pragmatic. They started with, we'll go out 2 years. So we saw the data repositories of X amount of dollars risk, a certain percentage. A majority of the data was really old. Then we moved it to a year, waited 4 or 5 weeks. Nobody was complaining about performance or can't gain access, I can't work. Then we moved it down to actually 45 days. And today they hover about 112 across many millions of records of PHI and other. They're down to like 2 or 3%, 5% max.
Mm-hmm.
What we're seeing again, even with that environment, able to tell a story of this will happen. So anecdotally, they had there was an incident a couple of weeks ago in January where two of the users at North Country fell for a phishing exercise and gave up their credentials to Microsoft 365. So again, we went right to the logs of Actifile, stored the interaction, confirmed there was no data exchange. Nobody got in and took files. Two, we saw what they clicked on. It was a housing authority, was one of those other non-for-profits they work with, reached out to them. Apparently they got breached and they didn't know they were breached many, many months ago. So other organizations. So we had to do a whole forensics of this person at this location. Did they share attachments and emails? How many of attachments had PHI and PAI? Were they protected between the two parties? Because if we felt that there was a requirement, give it to compliance, they would have to issue, based on our NIST framework, they would have to basically issue a statement to the regulators, and under HIPAA requirements, have 6 months to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Then the FBI, through the same exchange, we're working on another case. They reached out to us to see if it was the same thing and was any of the data that was stolen from that organization. So we're able to put all the pieces. It took several weeks to peel it back. Without NIST, without frameworks, I think they would have been like that housing authority. Oh my God, what do we do? Maybe we have to shut this thing down,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's real. This is very scary for organizations. But with every breach, it comes down to what forensically we think was taken. Do we need to get out ahead of it?
Mm-hmm. And
And yeah,
for the phishing attack, how long did it take you or them to know the answer to the question about the fact that there was no data that was compromised? How long did that take?
about 2 to 3 days later, we did a thorough
Mm-hmm.
examination within of the event when it was alerted to us. Within minutes, we made sure that the 365, because they gave up the credentials, the threat actors did get in for a split second because of geofencing, they shut them out. We got concerned. We spent 3 days combing through logs, and we used Actifile, the majority of it, of what the attachments of sensitive data. And if it was protected with Actifile, we like, whoosh, we knew because they can't read it. But there was a lot of data that was in those repositories and enclaves that were not protected because it was prior to 45 days. So we went through that and we checked the logs. Was there an attachment? Was there a rule in 365 established? We checked all those boxes. It wasn't the case for the housing authority where this originated from. We found out 3 weeks later, threat actors were sending out 6,000 or 7,000 emails with more phishing from that location, and they took all their data.
Jesus.
And the data they took were from other organizations that had patient-related data in it.
Mm-hmm.
So
Those guys weren't using Actifile,
no,
I bet.
no,
Okay.
they're a small organization, but
Yeah.
dangerous, very dangerous, and it had a ripple effect.
Yeah.
And you know, there's not a breach that I don't see that comes up every other day that I go, it's going to continue to happen. They're just going to get in, okay? And I believe that. You can't really. They're going to eventually get in.
Yeah.
Thing is, before they do, always try to get out ahead of it and know what you're working with. And that's
Mm-hmm.
where I think when I think of the Actifile platform and some of the things that we've been in discussions with you guys as a partner, the enhancements and the rest, the ability to say, take a question from, hey, James, can you tell me what these two users are working on? I could show a log. Can you show me if there's any sensitive data that shouldn't be out there? I can show them that. Can you show me my top users that interact with the sensitive data? I could do that. I mean, this didn't exist a couple of years ago. You'd
Mm-hmm.
have to sit back there and think about what tools could I go out there and use. And it's only a beginning, middle, end project. It won't give you kind of a sense of what the patterns are, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, we're living in a different world now. AI upon us. There's good AI and technology in this back end. It's only going to get better. No, getting out of this, I think firms have to understand, like you're running your business, know the numbers, know your data, be able to know what you're doing as an organization. This is, I think, a big blind spot for most companies. They don't really realize they don't know what they don't know. They don't know what's coming in and out.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
I think I did it on one podcast. Me personally, a couple of years ago, I ran it against my personal stuff and went, "How do I have risk?" And I went, "No." It was a deal room with my attorney, merger and acquisition stuff, and I'm like, "Wow, that's sensitive data. I didn't know I was still connected to that." I
Hmm.
decoupled myself, and that started my journey with the Actifile relationship because it
Hmm.
was upfront and personal going. My first reaction was call my attorney and go, "Do you know we still have access to this data? Get rid of it. It's 12 years old, 15 years old." He goes, "Really?" He went click, 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 got rid of that Dropbox, done. I did the same thing. And I went, wow. And then we started putting it out to our customers and seeing all different kinds of things. So I've got manufacturing, I've got chemical trading companies, I've got healthcare, and it's all different kinds of wacky numbers, right? When I say wacky numbers, healthcare sector, you're going to get a lot of PHI. ACH, banking information, my finance companies. Wow, it's like this is a treasure trove. Like
Right.
you could really do X, Y, and Z with this stuff, right?
Right.
Um, uh, you know, I'll share. I'll pivot just maybe not on topic. When we say ACH, I've seen in the last several months the latest scam is that companies will go up and do their automatic payment for certain services they buy. And they'll put in their bank information, ACH information that says that bill is paid. So what scammers do is they grab their valid bank numbers, they'll get it up there and pay for goods. It comes out of your bank account. And then
Yeah.
you're looking through your statements going, I didn't buy that item because they got your bank. And you can look up the ACH code for any bank, right? But if they got your bank account, they were buying goods because there's no they've got to stop this. This is a big issue. Okay. So I tested this with our guys on a simulation where we were buying goods. It came back and told us our bill was paid. And we got the software.
Wow.
And I
Well,
went,
like you said, that's only slightly off topic, but I think
yeah,
it also illustrates that even for a healthcare organization, a lot of attention is on HIPAA and PHI, but it's not just about that kind of data. Same with we were talking earlier, there's companies that are not necessarily the typical healthcare provider, but they're in the business, or any company that is doing work with employees, like any
yeah,
company, they've got
every company.
they've got medical information that should be protected. Um, okay, well, this has been really informative, and I want to thank you for your time. I think we covered a lot of really great material for our audience. And any parting shots from you?
Like I always work in the frame of mind thinking when you're looking at technology solutions or you're looking at a business, if you're regulatory, non-regulatory, or whatever, in the security sector alone, you got to be in the business of my customer. How do I empower my customer to grow their business? Make sure I'm not an impediment. And when I think about solutions in the security stack, and I think about what Actifile actually really can accomplish, it helps organizations accelerate those thinking because it's a lower security stack. It gets them thinking about, you know, if they have an AI play, well, it begins with what data do I have? They got to go out and find that, right? And mine it. And this is a good scoping exercise. But I think when I think about any solution, I always tell people, you know, how are you going to make me money, right? You're in the business of helping your clients make money at the end of the day because you're in the services business.
No. And once again, there you go, talking about the business part of it. But again, I think this was great.
Yeah.
It was a little bit of technology, but it was a lot about the business issues facing this part of the market. And James, thank you so much for your time, and look forward to doing this again.
No, thank you for letting me participate. Appreciate it.
No worries.